Well, we have Max Fisch on the line. Max, I really appreciate your time. And I'm going to send everybody over to your website because there's a lot of content there. Head over to realestateprojectsolutions.com, realestateprojectsolutions.com. And we're going to be talking about virtual assistants and building a team and a variety of things. But Max, I really appreciate your time here tonight.
Hey, Jack, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I kind of warned you ahead of time. I usually don't cover a lot of like background and how you get into this type of thing because I'm sure you've told the story a million times. But I find it interesting because you have done everything from fix and flipping to managing properties and a variety of asset type of real estate investing. So there must be a story associated with you getting into virtual assistants and building the team and scaling for that matter.
Yeah, there is a story, and I appreciate that. I certainly I don't know that I've done everything, but I've kind of tried to make my dent in my little corner of the world here. I got into the real estate business 2000s, went through 2008, 2009, went through that, and long story short, set up a call center in my office. I had at one time as many as 8 people working in cubicles, and things were going pretty well. And then you start to have all the issues that you have when you hire typical 10, 12, $14 an hour employees. And one thing led to another. They had to be let go. And a friend said, try virtual assistants. And so after about a year of kind of stumbling around, trying to find my way, we finally got some traction, and here we are today.
Yeah. So, one of the things that you and I chatted about before we even hit record is the fact that more times than not, when I've talked to other companies that do virtual assistants, they're very narrowly focused. You have a very broad aspect of your company, and it almost seems like you kind of tailor the real estate investor to the need, and you've tried to help them find specific talent. Like, why the broad aspect of your business?
That's a good question. I think it's twofold. I think one, I've always taken kind of a consultative approach, really to everything, even my real estate business itself. You hear a lot of folks talking about solving problems. How do we help this person as it relates to motivated sellers? And so taking that consultative approach, I think, is something that is ingrained in me, and something that I do really in all aspects of business. And then I think the other part of it is having started in this business at a pretty young age. I didn't really have a lot of mentors, and I didn't have access to YouTube. Facebook was barely a thing. Certainly, no advertising didn't really exist in the real estate space. So I didn't have a whole lot of information. It was kind of like stumbling through things and learning as you go. And so for that reason, we really try to find out what investors need in their business, rather than just saying, hey, yeah, we'll take your credit card and hope for the best. So I think it's those two things combined.
Sure. So, one of the things that I think a lot of us we're kind of struggling or dealing with is that there's kind of this romanticism associated with the grind and the hustle associated with building a business or working in the business. And frankly, we get really busy with things that we probably should be handing off to somebody else. At what point does somebody need to consider adding a virtual assistant or an assistant of any kind?
Yeah, so I look at it as outsourcing, from a very high level, and everything. I mean, think about your taxes. I don't know about you. I don't do my own taxes. I probably couldn't if I tried. Keeping, your IT guy. I mean, everything. If I'm sure the majority of your listeners, if they took a good look at their business, they would find that they currently outsource quite a bit of stuff. And, if you take that approach to your business in a very methodical way, you're going to find a whole bunch of things that, quite frankly, you shouldn't do, because either one, you're no good at it. Maybe there's somebody better. Or two, I always talk about the highest and best use of your time. So if you're a wholesaler and your thing is, closing sellers and signing contracts, that's all you should be doing all day long. Real estate agent, if it's getting listings, same thing. You shouldn't be answering your own phone. You shouldn't be setting your appointments. You shouldn't be even doing your own paperwork. You should just be getting listings. And so what I would say to answer your question is everybody should look at their business and find out where they're the most, where they have the most impact and where they generate the most revenue, and everything else should be outsourced. The question as to when really comes down to, your current financial position and if you can afford it.
Yeah. Well, how has it been to get people's mindset around that? Because more times than not, that has a lot to do with you making that investment and seeing the opportunity in scaling versus the expense.
Yeah, you're exactly right. So, I believe that we have two major assets, in business, right? You have, obviously your cash on hand or cash like equivalents you have, and then you have your time, right? So, you can either throw time at it or throw money at it, whatever the problem is. And, so I find that there's two kinds of people. There's the kind of people that look at the revenue that can be generated, from a certain activity, whether that costs something or it's free, doesn't matter, or the people that look at the expense, right? So it's simply just, leading with, wow, that's expensive, or, oh my God, that could save me so much time, or that could help me generate more revenue. Those are really the only two scenarios that we see. And I think most people, especially in today's day and age, they recognize that their time is valuable, and the more they can get off the plate, the better. Most people, they get it.
Right. We go into real estate investing to eventually free ourselves. We try to create this thing to become passive investors to a certain extent. We know that real estate isn't 100% passive, but we try to work towards that. But it's almost sometimes difficult to let certain things go and do what's needed to achieve exactly that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm guilty of that. There was a time where I tried to wear all the hats. I remember spending like 3 or 4 days trying to learn QuickBooks for no reason whatsoever. I think at some point though, you realize that either you are the bottleneck or there's something else that's the bottleneck that, like I said, they can or should be outsourced or handed off to somebody else, because most people are only good at a handful of things, certainly not everything.
Sure. So could you walk us through the process? Like, let's say somebody wants a virtual assistant. Are they going to have their first meeting with you or somebody on your team to ascertain exactly what they need or how do you help them?
Yeah, it really depends. So the majority of our business today is based on referrals, either from friends in the business or other clients. So typically, what will happen is somebody will go to our website, they'll fill out the form. One of my sales guys will contact them, set up an initial consultation. We do this initial exploratory call, find out about their business, find out about their needs. And see if we can even help. Excuse me. In some cases, folks are referred, and maybe they're given my phone number or something like that, and I'll typically work with them. So I'd say there's a good chance you could get either one of us, but I do try to make myself available. So we do that exploratory call. If there's a fit, then we would proceed to an agreement and a start date and start the onboarding process.
So I'm sure most of it, when you're dealing with real estate investors, is a lot of cold calling, maybe, and or receiving calls, making appointments. But are there any other services that your VAs can provide?
Yeah. So when we Brent Daniels is a friend. If you're familiar with TTP and his program, and basically we were providing some agents for his business, and when he started talking about us, we started to get a lot more traction, especially around the cold calling piece. So I'd say that represents maybe 40% of our business today, and outside of that, anything and everything real estate related. So we work for commercial real estate brokers, residential real estate agents, listings, transaction coordination, acquisitions, dispositions, general administrative tasks. I mentioned bookkeeping earlier. So really anything you can think of that doesn't require face-to-face. And again, that's where I kind of go back to that consultative approach. So I almost liken our business to like a staffing and recruiting firm.
Sure. And where do you primarily do your staffing and recruiting? Is it here in the U.S. or are you overseas somewhere?
Very, very rarely do we have domestic engagements. We've done, I don't know, maybe half a dozen placements where someone says, "Hey, look, I want an acquisitions guy in my office." Where we really shine is that overseas. We hire globally. There's a lot of companies out there that are focused specifically on the Philippines, and although they're good for some things, they have infrastructure and all that. They're definitely not the best for everything, and so depending on people's price points, depending on what they need, it could be somebody entry level like a Filipino, all the way up to an American, an expat, an American living abroad. And what's nice is you get that reduced expense because these folks are living in low cost living type areas.
Well, you bring up low cost. Like, what could somebody expect? Like, you source somebody for them in the Philippines. What does that typically run?
Yeah, so we have two lines of business. We have our managed solution, which is basically we handle everything, and that's going to start at 10 an hour. And that's for an entry level person, Filipino, maybe some of Central South America, and that could go all the way up to an expat. You could go 20, maybe 22 an hour. We typically have discounts and things like that, but I'd say a good rule of thumb is like 10 to 20 an hour, depending on the client's needs.
So do you find that the accents and a few other things, to be blunt, I find that more times than not, somebody with a thick accent is joining these call or making cold calls or doing things on your behalf. Things can start off a little shaky there.
100%, right? So I tell people a few things. So in my business, for example, I have 5 callers. We have think of it like a funnel. We have a whole stack, a lot of follow-up. And here in Philadelphia, it's extremely competitive. So for me, I totally agree, but I also have to remind people all the time, look, you're not the target market, right? If you were in foreclosure, if you were behind on your taxes, your response to people would probably be different than it is, today, given your current situation. But with that said, we interview 400 to 500 people a month, right? I got 3 women. That's all they do full time is just interviews. So just by that volume, we get incredible talent, arguably much better talent than most folks will get if they go out and throw up an ad on Craigslist or go on Fiverr or something like that. I have Filipinos that we've hired that you would have no idea that they're from the Philippines. We've gotten some of the most incredible, most talented, smartest, hardest working people from all over the world, just from incredible volume and a very, very rigorous hiring and recruiting and hiring process. So, yes, we shy away from accents unless somebody wants somebody to do administrative work that requires, an education, but very little phone engagement, then it doesn't matter. But in almost every other instance, that's a big issue. And we shy away from heavy accents for sure.
Sure. Well, as you've been, scaling this business now, you started off being a real estate investor, now scaling this business for yourself. What are some of the lessons that you've learned along the way? What's one of the biggest mistakes you made, and what changed in your business process?
So the biggest mistake that I always tell people is not taking big enough risks often enough. But that's more for my real estate business. This business in particular, one of the hardest lessons I learned, unfortunately, is be very careful about who you trust and who you choose to work with. We've had a number of folks come work with us, try to steal clients, try to steal data, try to steal different proprietary methods, SOPs, and it's all just silliness. A lot of the clients are personal friends of mine. So, they get a call from somebody who used to work for me saying, come with me, my phone rings. So it's like goofy. But I'd say, be careful who you trust. And then the other thing is, this goes right to outsourcing, which is know what you're good at and focus on that. Because if, like for me, going back to my analogy about taxes, for me to try to do my own taxes would be a straight waste of time. And it would take up so much time that, I don't know, $3,500 or whatever I pay a year to do the taxes is nothing in comparison.
Right.
And I think I think a lot of people really get hung up on all this software and things like that. For example, it's just, don't even try.
So give us an example of one or two of your clients and how you've changed their business by partnering with them.
Yeah, so we really look at ourselves as a partner. I'm glad that you put it that way. We are obviously just a vendor, and they can choose to come and go as they please. But I really try to take a personal interest in people's business. Again, I've been doing this long enough that I don't profess to know everything, but I have seen a lot, and I can, especially the newer guys, I can typically help at least give them some things to think about, maybe over and above what they might be considering at the time. So some clients, I think about. We have this gentleman newer to the business, and just like I said, he recognized what he was good at and what he wasn't good at. Being on the phone, generating those cold call leads was one of them, and so brought us on board and basically closed a couple of really, really significant deals right out of the gate. Nothing super sexy about this story other than to say, this is a guy that was, making $15-16 an hour, got into the real estate space. And I think his first two deals in the first, call it 6 months or whatever was more than he'd ever made in a year. So just a really, really exciting story. And then another, I would, we have a client, John, and he went from, doing a couple deals here and there, just kind of having fun with it. Him and his wife have a really incredible business, very successful business. Came on board with us, and I believe he's at 3. I think at one point he had 4 callers, and just absolutely crushing it. Doing a lot of business. But we really kind of came in, helped him create some SOPs, did some training. He had, I think, 3 employees, or has 3 employees. So we did some training there, and just really helped them to streamline things, because when you're in the trenches, it's hard to see what's right in front of you sometimes.
Sure.
So two different situations where we were able to, I think, do some good.
You've mentioned the term SOP a couple times there. You might want to clarify that so people know what you're talking about.
So when I say SOP, I mean standard operating procedures. We do a lot, for example, where we'll take maybe a routine process and we will create almost like a playbook or a training manual of the standard operating procedures for that role or that department within the business. And then a client might use that down the road for, say, future training, if they're looking to bring on another individual. If we have a playbook, say, for the lead generation aspect of someone's business, well, when they go from, say, 1 caller or 1 text or whatever, to 2 to 3 to 4, it's nice to have those training manuals and for everybody to know exactly what to do, how to do it, and it's uniform across, the entire department.
Yeah, it's really important to bring that up because before we hit record, we were talking about, people's expectations can be all over the place. So to what level does the person need to be involved? Let's say I hired a VA. Do I do the training? Do you do the training? Do you provide direction there? Like, how does that piece look?
Yeah. So I realized when you'd asked me before about the business, I mentioned there were 2 lines of business, but I only mentioned the managed. So we also have the unmanaged or the placement business. And that's where we just find the person, maybe do the training, client takes over, payroll, everything, and we're out. So regarding involvement, it can be anything from, we have clients that, for example, we're doing lead generation. They've never even signed into their dialer. So they have no idea what's going on as far as that goes. Now, obviously, we give them weekly reports. They know what's happening in their business, but literally no interaction. The old, what is it? I like to eat sausage, but I don't want to know how it's made. However the saying goes, all the way up to people who are, right in there, looking at the numbers every day and communicating with our team. And and then of course everything in between. So really, we try to again customize the solution for the for the client. Some people are more hands-on, and others just would rather focus on what they know they're good at.
Sure. And then there's some people that you talked about the consulting. There's a lot of people who they don't know what they don't know. When it comes to even like what they might need help with. Like, how deep does your consulting go when they call in looking for some help?
Yeah, so the consulting aspect of the business is relatively new. This is something that we started this year. When I was looking at the business, I find myself a lot of times, my real estate business is kind of doing its thing. I got it where I want it. I spend 10 to 20 hours a week doing that. The rest of my week, the other 20, 30 hours, whatever it might be, I find on the phone with people giving free information, which is perfectly fine. I have no issue with that. But I chose to really try to offer a higher level, a more personalized level of service for folks who are interested in I would say a deeper dive. And the focus is really general structure, outsourcing, scaling, all around that kind of idea. Think of if you're familiar with Gino Wickman's Traction, right people, right seats. And most people, they might have an idea of what they want, but how to implement it is a totally different thing. And human resources and hiring and training, that can be a really draining, ordeal for a lot of people. And it requires a lot of, typically requires a lot of bodies to get it done the right way.
Well, you mentioned 300 to 500 interviews a week or something. I mean, that's just a month. That's insane. Yeah. And that's an incredible pace. Like, so how do you find your best talent? I mean, to write an SOP for your three ladies that are doing all of the interviews, like how do they source the best talent amongst all those people?
Yeah. So we, this is, I don't know, 5 or 6 years in the making, and we have created a very arduous process for, applying with us, for, kind of going through the motions. It's not simply send a resume, have an interview. Yay, you're hired. We have really, again, I go back to the funnel idea. We've created this funnel where we essentially want people to bow out, right? We want people to say, you know what? Because we're trying to get, the very best, most highly motivated, and we're trying to find the people that are not going to jump in, say, this isn't for me, and then leave. Because retention, i.e. turnover, the biggest expense by far. So we really focus on trying to find those people that are going to come in, going to do a good job, and they're going to stick. So our process, there's, we're on 90 something different websites, paid and free. We're sourcing applications from all over the place. They're coming in. We have a database they all come into, and the ladies just go through this whole thing, and it's, send us this information, follow these directions, do an interview, and then we want you to do these couple of things, and you get a medical certificate. So it just goes on. And what we find is that a lot of people will just disappear, or they say, I don't want to do that, or whatever. And the folks who make it through are usually very, very high quality. And then we maybe would hire 50% of those folks or something. So it ends up being like 7-8% of the total people we interview, something like that on a monthly basis.
So when you go through all of those, you just talked about, you're very motivated that once you find this talent, to keep this talent. What strategies and tactics have you incorporated to make sure that these people are retained?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's funny because I've only ever gotten that question, I think, once or maybe twice. Most people, if you're a big, say, Cialdini fan, and you read about psychology and human interaction, most people are the same, right? They want to be treated well, and they want to know like they belong to something, whatever that means. And they typically want to enjoy to some degree what they do. But 9 times out of 10, it's about the people, the organization, that kind of community, that kind of involvement aspect. So we really focus on that. Everybody gets, some kind of paid vacation. Everybody gets, a certain amount of time off. We structure the workday so that for the people that are working basically a graveyard shift, right? Like the Philippines, for example, that we don't work them in such a way where they burn out. And then year over year, people get more and more benefits, maybe pay, maybe some kind of benefit. And then we do spiffs and we do these, these big team huddles. And we really just try to make people feel like they're part of something. And I really think that's kind of like the secret sauce.
One of the things that maybe it's just me, but one of the things that I've struggled with is that I want to have enough confidence in a team, whether it's virtual or local or whatever, where I don't have to feel like I have to constantly be on them or constantly managing them. Like, how have you been able to create an environment in order for them to feel like that they actually own their piece of the business and that they're actually doing what you're saying? And I'm sure that's part of that retention.
So that's a delicate balance, right? Because, we have, so like, for example, we have one woman in the HR department, and she's the one that a lot of people, they're not real happy with her, but she's doing her job. If you're 2 minutes late, clocking in, she's going to be right there. She'll be nice about it, be professional, but she's on you. So everybody knows that, look, have fun. Come do your thing, make some money. We might have a spiff this week, pick up some walking around money, but but you got to be on time. And conversely, we're not going to make you work OT unless you want to get paid for it. So the balance is the stick, right, versus kind of the carrot aspect. I do not do stick. She does stick. I'm more the good cop. And kind of focus on that piece of it. So we really start off with a probationary period, and everybody knows kind of these are the rules of the road. If somebody shows up late in that first probationary period, it's hey, listen, this is your warning. The second time they're going to get a corrective action. It's written, and we do everything's documented. And for us, it's really about, listen, we're going to pay more than most. Okay. And we're going to take care of you. But we also, are going to ask a lot of you in return. And we tell them that up front. Some people are up for that. And some people, they'd rather, get 2 computers, work for 2 clients at the same time and steal, Yeah,
I was going to ask you if that is an option. Where do you share these assistants with other companies, or it's more one person is dedicated to you?
Yeah, no, everybody that works for us, we hire everyone. We hire them exclusively. They all sign non-disclosures, background check, medical clearance. I mean, we take that stuff very seriously because in a lot of cases, these folks are handling sensitive information. If nothing else, they're client leads. They're leads that people are paying for, especially, again, if it's lead gen. We have some clients who are doing, say, property management, but these people are dealing with rental applications. They're dealing with people's social security numbers, their private personal information. I mean, we have to know, who we're hiring, and we have a responsibility to the client to make sure that we're not engaging questionable characters or anybody that would do anything, not even nefarious, but just sloppy. I mean, we gotta be very careful about that kind of stuff. So for us, it's very important that they work for us exclusively, that they understand, that's extremely important to us. And, I guess it kind of speaks to the culture aspect that you hear a lot about, especially like in the big corporate, environments. I tell everybody, look, if you're not interested in a home, if you're not interested in kind of being part of something, then it's probably not for you, and that's how I've always taught, that's every one of the women in HR, like a lot of the promotions that we do are internal promotions, so there's always something to work toward if you want it. And where some people, I mean, I've one guy's been with me for 7 years or something. He just wants to come in, bang the phones and go home. And he works in my personal business. He wants no interest in any management or anything like that. So everybody's a little different.
So if you get a VA through you, then do you have to commit to 40 hours a week? How does that look?
We do 20 and 40. So really it's part-time, full-time. And it really all comes down to, if you want 20 hours, for example, that's okay. But if you're in California, okay, now it's maybe 9 a.m. To what, 1 p.m. But that's Pacific time, right? So now I have to find somebody that wants like the exact opposite, right? Mm-hmm. And I can't ask somebody to like work for 4 hours, take off 4 hours, then work another 4 hours because they'd have no quality of life. And then we get back to the retention issue. So typically we ask that people, unless it's outside their budget or doesn't fit their needs, they try to go the full-time route. And especially with lead generation, it's so competitive now that anything less than full-time it's just not ideal for the client.
So when you bring on a virtual assistant, for example, do you find that it's easier to start off with a task or two that you're willing to hand off and then slowly add additional things as you learn how each other work, or dump as much onto that VA as possible?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think it really depends on how you're approaching it. So if you're coming to us, these people, I mean, we put them on payroll and we train them up front. So we do that on our dime. And we do that because when a client says, I want to get started, I don't expect them to start paying and then we train that person. But then there's also a whole team, right? So, and I'm talking the managed solution, not the headhunter, the placement business, I call it. But, there's an operations person, there's trainers, there's coaches. I mean, there's so much going on there that there's no reason why you can't just load somebody up. And a lot of times there's a little bit of training that goes on there. So, that's usually a process. But I would say within 30 days, that person should be rocking and rolling like they've been with you for 10 years.
Sure. Well, Max, this has been an eye-opening conversation. I'm going to direct everybody, if you're interested in scaling your business, head over to realestateprojectsolutions.com. I'll make sure to have that link in the show notes. But Max, before I let you go, is there a question or concept you wished we would have covered here today?
The only thing that I think that I would have, or that I would encourage everybody to consider, this is, for all your listeners, is that if you are going to scale or outsource, don't. The analogy I always use is painting a wall. It's 90% prep. The actual painting is 10%. Make sure that you do not cut corners and that you do the prep work up front, because the retention is a big issue. And God forbid you have somebody that does something they shouldn't do in your business. That could set you back substantially. So I would say if we had talked about that, that'd probably be beneficial to your listeners, but there's always next time.
Well, if you have a couple more minutes, I mean, maybe we should cover that, because when you're talking just now, one of the things that I would like to know is that if somebody is looking into any company such as yours for virtual assistants, is there a couple of questions that they probably should ask, or a couple red flags that they should be aware of?
Yeah, I always go for the hard ones, right? So a reference, I routinely offer references. I figure if you can't even convince one of your buddies to get on the phone and lie for you, I'm not suggesting anybody does that. That actually would not be cool. But if you can't figure out how to get somebody on the phone to talk to a potential client, then you have a problem. So, if the roles were reversed, I would want a reference. I would want to talk to somebody. What is your experience? I wouldn't necessarily make my decision based on that, but I would want to hear, how the onboarding went, what to expect. Is there anything you would do differently? These types of questions. So I think references are huge. The other thing is, I'd want to know if that person's in the business, right? So I am actively wholesaling and rehabbing in the Philadelphia market. When I speak from a place of experience, or maybe something I heard or saw with another client. And I think that's really important. And then the last thing I would say, if I was limiting it to say 3, would be talk about your team. I make my money in my real estate business, so I'm more interested in having a good client experience and a lot of support, right? I'm not worried about, necessarily how much profit this company generates. I want to make sure that we get the job done and we get it done correctly. So I think those are 3 pretty important questions that I would ask.
Well, I hope everybody stayed to the end there to catch that. Max, I really appreciate your time. This was a great conversation. You're welcome back anytime. I hope you'll take me up on that.
I appreciate it, Jack. It was a pleasure, man. Thank you.